Dispatchers of Reddit, what calls have you taken on the non-emergency line that definitely was an emergency? I've taken many legit emergencies on the non-emergency line. Most memorable was a lady who shot her husband and just called us to collect the body. What always shocked me was when it was busy and I would ask, is this an emergency or can you hold? People would always say they could hold, but then have legit emergencies. Like, no, your stab wound cannot hold. I often found that in shock people tend to get hyper focused on one detail and leave out vital ones. The opposite happens in veterinary care when you're running the front desk trying to get clients checked in while getting others checked out and there's 3 lines ringing. Is this an emergency or can you hold? No, I can't hold, I've been calling all day. Did you leave a message? No, but my cat doesn't like the food you told me to feed her because of her kidney failure and I want to talk to the drive because I think she can eat her regular food anyway. Please hold. I used to work for 111, which is a non-emergency medical line here in the UK. I once had a call from a carer for an elderly lady who was wheelchair bound and pretty much immobile. Upon taking the call, one of the first questions I ask is, can I possibly speak to the patient, which is normally a quick yes or no. The carer hummed for a good couple of minutes before deciding no, I couldn't speak to the patient. Her reasoning? The patient couldn't breathe and was turning blue. A friend and I were walking my dog past a local elementary school over winter break when we thought we heard a fire alarm ringing and faintly smelled smoke. We figured we were both just over imaginative since nobody was around or seemed to be concerned. An hour later, as we were walking back, we passed the elementary school again and the alarm and the smoke smell were still there. We decided to call the non-emergency line since nobody else in the surrounding neighborhood seemed to have noticed anything and we didn't want to look like teenagers pulling a prank. Operator answered and after we explained it to her she said, wait, you're telling me you think an elementary school has been on fire for the past hour and you didn't consider that an emergency? The fire was pretty small and there was no structural damage, but yeah, that was not a smart moment. I've never even told my mother that I'm one of the unnamed sources that alerted the authorities to a fire in a local elementary school. It is a secret my dog and I will take to our graves. It's funny because I had kind of the opposite experience one time. When I was probably like 11 or so, I came across a big fire in the woods outside of the city. Like, multiple big trees ablaze. It wasn't a frequently traveled area, but it was a really big, quickly growing fire. I ran away and almost didn't call anyone because it seemed scary and hard. I sat there thinking, and then I saw the fire getting bigger in the distance. So I called 911 because I was sure it was an emergency. The 911 operator was very dismissive though. Then they put me on hold for a while, over 10 minutes. I wasn't even sure they were really going to send the fire department. That was the first time I ever had to call 911 and my takeaway was that maybe 911 didn't really work the way I thought it did. I thought for years that I was stupid because I didn't understand what a real emergency was. Oh god, 2 years past roadside assistance dispatching. Here, it was unbelievable how many people were dumber than their cars and they were in control of the hunk of metal. My favorite call was answering a call back from a tow truck driver saying we needed to contact the police as he arrived to a car accident. Woman calls in and says she had pulled to the side of the road for whatever and her SUV slid in the snow down the embankment and was like 5 feet from the road. She just needed a winch to pull her back to the road. Tow driver arrives to some skid tracks on the road, gets out and sees a woman standing next to an SUV on its side 15 feet down an embankment in a ditch. Of course she was insisting that it wasn't a car accident and calling up police and insurance was not needed. It's usually old people. It's not an emergency, but I fell 10 hours ago and have just now been able to crawl to the phone. Just need some help getting up. On and please. Don't have them using all their lights and sirens. I don't want to wake the neighbors or oh I'm just having chest pain and can't really breathe right. Just want someone to come check me out. Or my husband hasn't been able to have a bowel movement in a while and now he's having really bad stomach pains. They usually downplay things that can go really bad for them really fast. I think they feel embarrassed or like they don't want to be a nuisance. I got told off for this the other night. I was sitting up in bed because I had just woken up and could barely breathe. Like if I laid down there would be no air going into me at all. I have asthma and had been diagnosed with a chest infection a week ago. The antibiotics weren't working and it was definitely getting worse. I was taking several puffs of Ventolin every half hour or so to keep breathing. Called 111 and downplayed the hell out of it. I'm a little out of breath sort of style, trying not to wheeze down the phone. They told me to call the out of hours GP. I didn't. Waited until the following day and walked, with several stops, to my GP who promptly set the nurse on me and told me to call an ambulance if it happened again. Never underestimate asthma, she said, and here I'm feeling like an absolute idiot. My peak airflow was hovering 80 to 120. I cold suffocated because I didn't want to cause a fuss. I was a full-time career for my grandmother before she passed. IDK how many times she fell and didn't call for me in the middle of the night. And I would go check on her, and there she is, on the floor. She refused to use the emergency call button we installed, wouldn't keep the house phone in reach, so I installed baby monitors, so I could hear everything in her room from anywhere I went in the house. She was so angry at me for it. Not that I cared. Her safety was more important than her embarrassment. She would hate when I called 911. What would the neighbors think? Bitch. They'll think I'm an amazing granddaughter for taking care of your old ass and getting you to a hospital and not the morgue. Used to work for the 111 service, which is supposed to be non-emergency. The most memorable ones was when a guy's wife just fell asleep. Yeah, she was dead. Another one was a mum called us after her 18-month-old wouldn't wake up after she dropped it down a fucking flight of fucking stairs. Edit. I forgot to add she was contacting us about 7 hours after it occurred. One was a guy whose mum called us as she had some concerns for her son's mental health. Gives me his number, so I give him a call. All I hear is, edit, it was her daughter-in-law's number. Ike. He's got a knife, please my baby, and the call cuts out. Everything turned relatively fine according to the call notes. A call from a phone box from a guy saying he was taking some drugs, he wouldn't say which, with his friend who then had an overdose and started foaming at the mouth and went a funny color, so the guy ran away. I asked when this occurred, to which the guy responded about 15 minutes. I never found out what the specific outcome was, but let's be honest. Plenty of strokes, heart attacks, kids drinking bleach, basically anything and everything you could imagine. You'd be calmly asking questions while frantically gesturing the universal phrase for, why the fuck are you calling US? Edit. Got a call on a Sunday afternoon that went like this. My wife has taken a bit of a funny turn. Maybe 7/10 times I heard this phrase. It ends up being some kind of common stroke symptom. Been complaining that her arm went numb and she's started slurring her speech. She's been feeling dizzy and complaining of a really bad headache. We didn't call anyone because it was the weekend, but it's got lot worse. Okay, when did the symptoms begin? Friday afternoon. Not a dispatcher but a paramedic. We got a call for a fall and the patient only needed help up. Per dispatch notes, reporting party said patient was breathing, conscious, and was at her normal mental status. We didn't run lights and sirens due to no apparent life threats and the relatively short distance, under 2 miles with light traffic. Get inside. Patient is having a full-blown stroke. She is unresponsive and was struggling to breathe. The wall right next to her head had a hole that busted through the drywall. Patient ended up having a hemorrhagic stroke, and it was believed to have happened when she hit the wall. We took her home on hospice a few days later. Still annoys me to this day about the whole situation, but you live and you learn. However, there is not much we or the hospital could have done. Family honored her wishes and asked for comfort measures. I went to one fall where patient was reporting a sore knee and not much else. When we got there, tuned out, she had fallen 3 meters from a ladder while fixing her gutters the day before. Is pretty sure she blacked out for a while and her right knee/leg was at least twice the size of her left. Couldn't bend it at all to even attempt getting in a car, and couldn't even see where her kneecap had gone. X-ray later revealed it was about 4 inches further around her leg than it should have been. Also turned out she had multiple breaks in her tibia and fibula. Cranial X-ray also revealed a skull fracture. She lived alone and was in no condition to drive herself to hospital, but wasn't sure it was serious enough to call an ambulance for. Decided to call when her leg didn't seem any better the next day. Advice: if you fall 3 meters from a ladder onto concrete you need to go to the hospital. A family called in because the elderly grandmother had injured her leg. They couldn't quite describe how it happened, but somehow, this poor lady's femur was broken and sticking out of the skin. Evidently this led to charges for elder abuse/neglect, and I can only guess they called the non-emergency line to downplay the severity.